A lot of us live in our everyday lives and we're going through whatever it is that we're doing. And then we have some kind of dreams and fantasies about where we might be one day in the future. But we're not actually doing the work of bringing those two things into alignment with each other. And so what we do in Manifesto is we formulate a vision. Based on that vision, we set goals, and then we start working on concrete habits that are moving us from our life and the person we are today towards that ultimate vision, if it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years out in the future. So welcome, guys. Good to have you here, and nice to have you for a Friday evening discussion on leadership. I guess it is the guys who are still sitting in front of their computers talking about leadership on a Friday afternoon after, heading a little bit into the autumn here. There's something that drives us men sometimes to want to go another layer deeper and further. So I'm happy to have you guys here. I'm not the only one who wants to have this discussion. And we've just released a Men Lead Manifesto on Manifesto Core. And I think it's the clearest statement of our approach to leadership so far. So I'm really, really happy with it, actually. It's been the result of a good month of conversation. So I'm going to do a short presentation of it here, and then I'd love to hear your guys' questions, comments, thoughts, and maybe it's even going to develop because we've just released it. And the main principle of the 10 principles of Manifesto is that they're always under development. We're always updating them because we think that we don't have the full recipe yet, the full understanding of what it is that we're trying to do in molding the best possible men that we can be out of ourselves. So maybe there'll even be a little bit of an update that comes from this conversation. So, men lead. Maybe a provocative statement for some people, but manliness is a natural connection to leadership. Manly men will find themselves in leadership positions a lot of the time. Sometimes they won't want those leadership positions. Sometimes it'll be other people pushing them into those leadership positions. They might successfully avoid for some time, but they normally end up in a leadership position anyway. And it's especially as men, we grow in our manliness as we're able to take on more responsibility in our lives for ourselves, for our own situations, and for those around us. And as we do that, then there's automatically going to be a tendency for people to look for us. One definition of leadership, which I really like, is leadership is influence. So if you're not influencing anybody, then you're not leading anybody else either. So it's when people are looking to you and they're being influenced by the way you're living your life, the things that you're doing, the direction that you're heading, then you're leading them. And so whenever we're doing something well, then that's what's going to happen. And there's a massive lack of good leadership in the world today. And so sometimes people are influenced and led by all kinds of things, but we're talking about the kind of influence in positive directions to go somewhere valuable that's good for you, good for those around you, good for society, and good for life. So one of the misunderstandings about leadership is that we often mistaken, and especially in the culture, is that we think of leadership as something to do with power and authority over other people. So we think of it as a role that you're given either by a company or a state or something like that, that you're the leader now, and then you get to decide over what everybody else does and tell them what to do. And this is just power and authority, but it's not actually real leadership in the sense that we're trying to get at it here, at least. And so it's more leadership is when you are taking responsibility for an outcome. Stephen Covey, I had a quote in our last newsletter. Stephen Covey says, leaders are not born, neither are they made. Leadership is a decision. So you decide to take the burden of leadership upon you. And it means that you say, guys, this is where we're going. This is what we want to get to. And I'm going to be the one to make sure that we get there. And so you ultimately are the one who's willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that happens. That's a dependable, a good leader that you can go behind because you're going to be successful. It's not just someone who's like, a good talker and, able to convince a lot of people with charisma, but at the end of the day, he's not willing to do any of the hard work. So you want someone who's able to be certain that he can create a compelling, even ambitious vision, but be able to know that and has a track record, preferably, of being able to get there. So one of the most important things when it comes to leadership, and this is what we work with right from the beginning with Manifesto Core, is vision. And if you don't know where you want to go in your own life, then it's very hard to know, to be able to convince anybody else to come with you as well. So being able to envision the future and then actually move towards it is a very difficult thing. A lot of us live in our everyday lives and we're going through whatever it is that we're doing. And then we have some kind of dreams and fantasies about where we might be one day in the future. But we're not actually doing the work of bringing those two things into alignment with each other. And so what we do in Manifesto is we formulate a vision. Based on that vision, we set goals, and then we start working on concrete habits that are moving us from our life and the person we are today towards that ultimate vision, if it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years out in the future. And so that brings together vision and practicalities. And we have a tendency, especially in the West, to be floating off into the air or totally lost contact with everything down here. And so the vision should be a holistic vision that includes every single part of our life. And that's where I found personally myself, I think, the being in a group of men that are holding me accountable for the things that I say I want to achieve is the absolutely necessary key to doing this. Another topic that we don't deal with in Manifesto, but that we talk about on these network meetings, is the need for an explicit existential foundation in your life. So you need to know, what is life about? What are we all doing here? Where am I going? What is the purpose of my life? And this is so we talk about, this is something like a cosmology. What is the cosmos? Like you say, I believe in science. Well, like science says that 98% or 93% of existence is dark matter and dark energy, which we can't even detect, so what is it actually I'm trying to do? So a lot of the time, this is going to go down into what one would call the religious and spiritual foundation of your life. And you need to be able to, as a man, be able to look at those things. So much in the West today, especially, it's women who are all spiritual and fluffy and going all these kinds of things. And men are kind of like, oh no, I don't go into that kind of thing. But when it comes to a deep conversation, maybe somebody's, just lost a partner and that died or something like that, then a lot of men just don't really know what to do with themselves and how to deal with those kinds of situations. So we need deep men who are interested in and spend time looking into the mysteries of existence. In my own life, I thought it was all about the journey outwards in all of my 20s and even the beginning of my 30s as well. It was about exploring the world and meeting everything outside. And the older I get, the more I realize that it's actually the journey inwards. That's the interesting one. And that's where I can discover things of real value as well. So men who have explicit religious practice, preferably rooted in a community of other people who are doing the same practice and holding each other to standards of different values and having difficult conversations about how to become better people as well. That's the deepest work that needs to happen. That's not what we do in Manifesto Core, but we do say that men need to engage in that kind of approach as well if they really want to become leaders. When I meet a man who knows exactly what his life is about and where he's going and what the purpose of it is, everything else in his life, it's so clear how firm he is, how clear he is. And I can feel that guy. Whereas with these people who are just like, if you don't have enough life experience to have explored these kinds of questions yet, then people are very like a leaf blowing in the wind a little bit. They don't really know where they're going. So maybe they'll take a stand on something very, very important politically or something like that. But maybe a year later, suddenly they'll be in something else all of a sudden as well. So there's no kind of stability and strength in it. So other than that, then we also talk a lot about in Manifesto as the family, as an ideal training ground for developing leadership in men. This happens, first of all, with your mother and your father. It's your relationship with them. If you're not able to be a good child for your parents and you're always in rebellion of them, and I've met 40, 50, 60-year-old men who are still in rebellion against their parents. I was in rebellion against my parents until I was about 34 years old, something like that. Then you haven't been able to integrate the wisdom that's been passed down to you from previous generations. And so there's a need to be able to see your parents just as normal people like yourself that have been doing the best that they could with the resources that they were given, and be able to try and meet them with curiosity and understand them. And listen to them as well, instead of just telling them all the things that they should be doing better or something like that. And when you start doing that well, then you can even start, when you become a good child for your parents, you can also start then thinking about becoming a father for your own family as well, and doing that better as well. Because of course, many men become fathers without having first sorted out the relationship with their wife. And for me, the burning hearth, the absolute center of this whole thing of leadership then comes in my relationship with my wife. It's a woman that I've committed to for the rest of my life. And I've actually made a very explicit decision, and she's done the same thing, that we focus all of our sexual energy. And when I say sexual energy, it's all about intimacy and connection, and of course physical pleasure. But that's just a part of it as well. But we focus all of that just on each other. And so I don't masturbate, I don't watch porn, I don't have other places where my sexual energy is leaking out, but I focus it on my wife. And by doing that, it becomes this incredibly kind of like high pressure cooker somehow, where it's a very steep learning curve, because we're constantly driven towards each other, because we have all this energy that we want to release, and we want to connect, and we want to meet each other and go deeper with each other. But that's difficult. It's probably the most difficult thing in existence to really get to know a life partner and to stay intimate with them. Especially right now, we have 2 kids. One of them's only 4 months old. It takes a lot of energy, and so to be able to keep that burning flame bright in our relationship is difficult. But what I realize is, and in me and my wife, we have an explicit understanding that I'm the masculine part of the relationship, I'm the man, and she's the woman. And so that means she should be in the feminine part of the relationship. And so this doesn't mean that it's just me telling her what to do all the time, but it means that there's a certain dynamic between us, and that we're looking to grow into even more as well, which means that she can be more in a relaxed, flowing, receptive way of being in her life, and that I can be in a more structured, taking charge, seeing a vision, being able to convey that to other people, and lovingly being able to ensure that my family altogether is growing in the right direction towards having a better life together. And so that means I have to lead my family. And leading a family is not easy, especially because, have little kids who, have all kinds of chaotic and difficult things in their lives as well. And so, me and my wife, if we're good, if we're connected, if we're intimate with each other in a way that we're on the same wavelength, then everything else works very well. And the moment that me and her are missing each other, irritated with each other, frustrated about something, have miscommunicated, misunderstood something, and had a bad morning, then everything else falls to pieces as well. And so it means that there's a necessity for me to constantly be working on learning to love my wife better. That's the most difficult thing, I think, for men, is to learn to love. Women, it's difficult for them to not dominate their husbands. That's what they all want to do. Women want to dominate men. And a lot of guys, a lot of relationships, men feel that they're loving their wives just by submitting to her, but that's not at all. That's the chicken's way out. That's the spineless, weasel way out, is to just let women dominate you and let her make all the decisions about the holidays, about the finances, about the house, about everything else. No. As men, we need to be making sure that we're engaged in these conversations, that we're at the very least, an equal part of these conversations, while listening to her, taking in her needs, her emotions, all of the things, because we want her to have to be happy and to be able to create a beautiful home for our children, and for all of us to be thriving. But I'm the one making the decision, because I'm the one who has the strategic brain that can be creating that long-term vision and bringing everything together. So that's what I do. And what I find in my life is, as I'm able to do this with my wife, then it just happens very naturally in my work situation, with projects that I'm running and things like that. Like, it's the exact same problems that I'm dealing with in both spheres. And as I'm able to learn to love my wife, then I also learn to love my colleagues and the people who are working for me, and the volunteers that are doing projects for me and things like that as well. Because at the end of the day, I believe that love is that thing that does lead to leadership. It's not about just exerting power and forcing. You can lead through force, of course, but it's not a very long-term, stable, and meaningful strategy. So being able to see people, understand their needs, and be able to unite that vision that you have with the other people, that creates a synergy between their growth and the movement of all of you together into a higher level, is, for me, what leadership is about, and what we're trying to learn to do better here in Manifesto, as much as we can. So yeah, that was my little start off.